Financial Planner. Follow us on YouTube.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
Hey, thanks for being here. And I wanted to start off with gold, and we're slowly seeing gold move up. Yes, they come out with these contracts, they try to push it down, but gold has been pushing upward. And I wanted to get your take on this. Why do you think all of a sudden gold is starting to move up, and do you think it'll go even higher?
Well, there's some things that have changed or are changing in the background. First off, the dollar is down 12 points, call that 11% since the beginning of the year. And gold is the mirror image of the dollar. So a weaker dollar obviously is a support to gold. Also from a geopolitics standpoint, it looks like the hegemony of the U.S. may be being challenged. I mean, take, for example, last week, China announced that they're going to trade oil for yuan backed in gold. That was followed by Venezuela saying that they're going to trade their oil not for dollars. So we've got some things that are showing less use of the dollar, which is less velocity of the dollar. And you've got cross-currency rates sucking value out of the dollar. So that's probably the most important thing. We also have seen in the last few weeks 3 or 4 major attempts at flash crashes. In other words, in the past, you've seen 1 million, 2 million, 3 million ounces of gold sold, and you'd see a $20, $30, $40 drop in the price of gold. And they've tried this 3 or 4 times in the last few weeks. And by the end of the day, gold steadied itself and actually turned and closed higher. That's never happened in the last 4 years.
So do you think that they are running out of ammunition right now to keep gold down? Because, like you said, we're seeing that they're trying to keep it down, but it continually moves further up and it's increasing in value. I mean, are they stuck right now?
Well, what's happening is the paper markets are having less and less effect on price, and the physical markets are having more and more effect on price. You know, it's funny. I emailed somebody back this morning, just a one-line tongue-in-cheek response. I said, we haven't stolen anyone's gold lately. Because the conversation went, you know, in the past, Libya had their gold stolen, Iraq had their gold stolen, and, you know, we were going back and forth, and I concluded it by saying, we haven't stolen anyone's gold lately. Maybe that's why they don't have gold to deliver to hit the physical markets.
Now, what's very interesting is that Germany was, you know, repatriating their gold. And I don't know if you saw this, but some of the bars, they had like different stamps on it, and it looked like they were much newer, especially the ones coming from the Fed. I don't know if you...
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. They did not get the same bars back that they delivered. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Not only that, originally when the gold was first starting to go back to Germany, they were melting them down and recasting them. There would be no need to do that. And again, gold has a fingerprint and gold has serial numbers, and the serial numbers did not match.
Now, we also saw Minutia go over to Fort Knox, and he told everyone that the gold is safe, that, you know, it's all there, don't worry. Now, we know there's many different sectors where they keep the gold. He checked on one. Actually, there was no camera crew. There was nothing that was involved in this where the people actually saw proof. Why do you think he actually did this right now? Because the last time I think it happened was like 70 years ago or something. Why now? Why did he have to do this?
Well, the last time anybody went actually into the vault, I think it was either a senator or a couple congressmen or something, and that was back in the 70s. But the last audit, I believe, was 1956. So you're talking over 60 years ago. As to why Minutia would go in now, I don't know. A bad joke? It's hard to say. The tweet that came out saying gold is safe, I looked at it and I said, no kidding, but not our gold.
So, yeah. I mean, to me, it felt like he was just trying to reinforce that, yeah, all that, conspiracy theory that we don't have it, we actually do, and don't worry about it. And I think he was just trying to make everyone believe that it was all there.
Well, I mean, my initial comment was, thou doth protest too much. And I can see the day, Dave, when China calls our bluff and they roll out a whole bunch of armored cars into their national stadium, which is completely ring-fenced by soldiers, tanks, you name it, and they pull all their gold out and put it in the middle of the field and say, we've shown you ours, now you show us yours. I mean, it's a game of poker, and we've been bluffing since the 70s. Well, really since the 60s with the London Gold Pool. The London Gold Pool was trying to prove that gold was worth $35 an ounce, when in fact it was worth more. The marketplace said that.
Now, it's very interesting when you said, when China is eventually going to say that. I mean, that would just implode the economy right off the bat. I mean, because that the U.S. would not be able to show that much, or maybe anything at all.
Well, it would implode the dollar, and then you'd have the problem, and I think you even titled one of the interviews you did with me previously, how will the U.S. trade if they have no gold to settle and the dollar is shunned internationally? Mm-hmm. It brings that question to the forefront. And I think that is the big question, is how is trade going to be performed during and after the reset? There's going to be some big changes in standards of living. And I assure you the standard of living in the U.S. is going to drop drastically, cut in half, or maybe more.
And we discussed this before, and I agree with you. And I wanted to take that and move to the economy right now. And I wanted to get your take on the economy and how you think the economy is doing. I mean, are we in the same boat? I know Trump has been president now since January when he was inaugurated. And here we are already in September. And, he said he was going to be bringing back manufacturing. Do you see any changes in the economy at all?
No, not really. It's still bumping along at recessionary levels. You can see retail sales are stagnant. Look at prior to the hurricanes, and the hurricanes will help the auto industry, but they had massive channel stuffing. They were producing cars, shipping them out to dealers and saying those cars were sold when in fact they weren't. They were on dealer lots. And I'd like to go back, and I know I harp on this all the time, but if you look at credit, global credit growth or contraction, credit is actually beginning to contract worldwide. And there's no other way that the economy can go, or the economies can go, than to follow the credit contraction, because everything runs on credit.
No, and we've discussed this in the past where, once credit freezes up, it's kind of game over for everything.
Yes. Yeah, because you're talking about credit. Everything runs on credit. The two most important things that run on credit are the financial system and distribution. And the distribution obviously is the most important, because you're talking about food and products getting to the market. And without credit, products are not going to move. And without credit, products are not going to enter our shores. If the U.S. had its credit line shut off, in other words, if foreigners decided we don't want dollars anymore, the question I just asked, how are we going to trade? And the problem is, it's been 20 years, 30 years since the U.S. has made some products that we consider everyday products.
Yeah, that's going to be a big problem. And plus, we see China, Russia, and many other countries, creating the Belt and Road. And the U.S. is really not a part of that right now. And they're setting up this whole trading system out in the East. And you mentioned before the Chinese yuan, the oil futures backed by gold, and countries moving away from the dollar. I mean, when this happens, I mean, we're seeing it happen. It's unfolding right in front of our eyes. When this happens, what happens to the dollar?
Well, the dollar will collapse. You'll see a huge gap to the downside. And it's my opinion that the East is just about ready. I mean, they've made trade deals. They've got the Silk Road set up. They've got credit facilities. They have clearing facilities to mirror and replace SWIFT. They don't need to use dollars. And when they get their system up and running, it will be to the exclusion of the U.S. and to the dollar.
Now, this wasn't done by, accident where they set everything up. I mean, this was done on purpose, right?
Yeah, no, this has been going on. This was originally thought about probably 10 years ago, back to the great financial crisis. And China has actually, if you go back and look at the deals, the trade deals that China has done and the credit facilities that they've put in place, they've been actively pursuing this since at least 2013. So for at least 4 years. And think about the AIIB. They've recruited some Western nations. They recruited Britain and Canada that are going to participate in that. And of course, the U.S. was invited, but we declined.
Is Trump doing anything to maybe join the AIIB or anything like that?
No, if anything, Trump's mindset, right or wrong, and you can argue right in one instance, wrong in another instance, but his mindset is protectionism, isolation. So no, he's not looking for the U.S. To join anything. He's looking to renegotiate NAFTA and other deals.
Now, if he stays with isolation, I mean, isn't this what George Washington did? This was basically what he said, that we need to be isolated, and I don't know if he's following that frame of mind, but in this world today where everything is, free-flowing and we have to deal with other countries, is this going to work for the United States?
Well, it's obviously a way different world today. You go back to the 1780s, 1790s, yes, we did perform trade, but we made, there were shoemakers, there were farmers, that we produced our everyday products. And today we don't produce our everyday products. I mean, just go into Walmart and you'll see probably 70% of the stuff on the shelves says made in China. So isolating us now it's a problem.
And if he continues down this path and the rest of the world, because we could see throughout Asia, throughout Europe with the Silk Road, I mean, they're all joining in. We're going to be left out in the cold, aren't we?
Right. And it used to be back in the 50s and 60s when the U.S. was more on financial solid ground, we could isolate individual countries through financial, trade, etc. sanctions and really put a hurt on other countries. The isolationism, the protectionism is going to hurt us. It's not going to hurt the other countries because they've already cut deals. They've already got things in place for trade, for credit, etc.
So I wanted to move on to the debt ceiling right now, and there's many individuals who, follow cycles, and they say, some type of an event is coming up this fall, and we know the debt ceiling, the budget. I mean, there's a lot of things coming up this fall, and I wanted to get your take on, does it matter at this point if the debt ceiling is moved higher or it doesn't move at all? I mean, does it really matter anymore?
What debt ceiling? I mean, that would be my response. There is no debt ceiling, and there has not been a debt ceiling. It's been, I think they've had 79 debt ceiling increases since 1960. So they've had 79 increases in 57 years. And originally back in the 60s, and I believe there was a real thought of trying to keep the debt down. Then it became the debt ceiling was strictly for show. It was strictly theatrics to show the rest of the world, oh, we are fiscally sound. We have a debt ceiling. We're not going to exceed it. But it always gets bumped up. And at this point, with Trump siding with the Democrats, and that's pretty weird too, that the Democrats, the party that's out of power, is the one that wants to get rid of the debt ceiling. In the past, it's always been it's been reversed. In the past, you always had the sitting Congress, or I'm sorry, the party that is the majority would want the higher debt ceiling because it would, business could go on. And to get rid of the debt ceiling, basically what they're saying is we're going to borrow to infinity and we're going to print to infinity. And basically it brings to fruition Jim's coined phrase of QE to infinity. And the opposite of infinity, remember, is zero. And we're talking about the currency, and that's what they're talking about, really talking about doing, is printing and borrowing to infinity. And they really have to do this. They really, at this point, there's so much debt in the system that it cannot be paid back with the existing money supply. The only way to pay back past debt is to borrow anew and create new cash to pay old debt. So we're at the exponential point right now, and that's what no debt ceiling is all about.
And when other countries see this, where we don't care about how much we spend, how much currency we create, I mean, aren't other countries going to look at this and say, okay, wait a minute, what are they doing here? This is getting out of control, and the full faith and credit of the U.S. dollar, isn't there going to be a problem?
Exactly. I mean, think about it from a neighbor-to-neighbor standpoint. You loan your neighbor money, and you see him living high on the hog and above his means, and he tells you, well, I'm not going to go to work anymore. I'm just going to borrow. I mean, what would you think? And that's really what the world is going to think. And that's going to create a complete vacuum of confidence in the dollar. We're headed to hyperinflation. That tells you right there that we're headed to hyperinflation.
I want to stay on the track of hyperinflation because, I mean, the ECB came out and they said, okay, we're not doing anything with the interest rates. They're in negative territory. They're continuing with stimulus. The Fed, basically, they're not really doing it. Actually, they've been adding to their balance sheet instead of shrinking it. They added, I think they're up to 20 trillion or something in their balance sheet right now. And at this point, are the central banks stuck? Are they worried that if they stop all of this, everything just falls apart?
Well, they are stuck. And we've talked about this before. There is no way that they can actually tighten and take money or take credit out of the system. As Richard Russell always said, we're at the point of the system must either inflate or it dies. So central banks are completely stuck. And to show you how stuck they are, so far this year, they've put $2 trillion into markets to support the markets.
And you're talking about asset purchases. That's what
asset purchases so far this year of $2 trillion from central banks all over the world. Now ask yourself, what if they didn't make that $2 trillion? Where would the markets be? Or what if they actually tightened and took $2 trillion out of the markets? Where would they be? They'd be a big black smoking hole of nothingness.
That is true. So I wanted to get back to hyperinflation. And when you say hyperinflation is coming, what in your mind and what your research tells you, what do you see happening here? How is hyperinflation going to happen? Because a lot of people are saying we're going to see deflation.
Well, the hyperinflation is going to be a monetary event. It's going to be the destruction of the fiat currencies themselves. if you go back to the 1930s, we had deflation in the US, we had deflation worldwide because money was backed by gold back then. So what happened was money became more valuable versus real goods. The problem today is money is backed by, I shouldn't say money, but currencies are backed by nothing. And this is the fallacy to Harry Dent's call of gold going to 700 and 400 and 250. Today's dollar is not your grandfather's dollar. Today's currencies are not backed by gold. They're not backed by anything at all. What they are is they're created by credit. And we're living through the greatest credit bubble in the history of history. When this credit bubble goes, it's going to take the fiat currencies and crush them in some cases to zero. Currencies will actually be changed. So the difference between the 30s and the difference between today is what money was. Dollars were money. They were attached, interchangeable with gold up until 1933. From that point forward, there became a widening span between gold and the dollar until where we are now, until 1971, to where we are now. Gold and the dollar are exact opposites. Gold is money. Dollars, euros, etc. They're currencies, and they're currencies that are created from credit. And credit is the problem. So you can't have a deflation versus dollars, but I assure you we're going to have a deflation versus gold. We will have a deflation versus real money.
When we see the hyperinflation, you're talking about the devaluation of the dollar, gold value of, is increasing, and the cost of products going up. Now, out in the Middle East, I just wanted to bring this in because, we were using the petrodollar out in the Middle East, and it looks like Syria is lost, Iraq is making deals with Iran, and Venezuela is moving away from the dollar. Now, the whole petrodollar system, which, since 2001 or so, where they tried to have regime change and they were trying to keep the system operational, it is all falling apart right now.
Right. I equate what's happening right now to going back to elementary school or junior high school or whatever. You have the United States has been a bully for years and years and years, and we've weakened ourselves in every way imaginable. We weaken ourselves financially, militarily, morally, you name it. And we're at the point now where it looks like China is standing up to the U.S. or leading a stand up to the U.S. And you've got, I wrote this the other day, the equivalent of, the guy who plays flute in the band is standing up against the U.S. I mean, for Venezuela to stand up and say, we're not going to accept dollars anymore, that got Gaddafi killed. That got Saddam Hussein killed. And now they say it, and immediately Russia comes out and says if Venezuela is attacked, then they're attacking us. So it's literally all the kids in school are standing up to the bully.
That's exactly what it seems like now. And it looks like since they've been dealing outside the dollar, they're not, China and Russia together, they're really not that afraid anymore. Even at the UN Security Council, they're standing up to sanctions and what the United States wants to do with North Korea. And it looks like they're trying to get control of the situation.
Well, Dave, I've been saying, or Jim and I have been saying this for about 6 or 8 weeks now. We actually got our own channel for our own subscribers got shut down from YouTube because we talked about the first naval destroyer that was T-boned. There's now been 2 naval destroyers T-boned by cargo ships, by freighters. Something that Jim and I have been talking about for about the last 6-8 weeks or more has been the perceived military weakness, if you will, by foreigners. If you go back 2 years ago, the Donald Cook was shut down and buzzed by, well, I guess it wasn't a MiG, it was an Su-25 or something like that. And then we didn't hear anything about it. And I think it was 2 summers ago. And then 6 or 8 weeks ago, the Fitzgerald got T-boned by a freighter, and that was followed by the McCain being T-boned by a freighter. There have been 4 naval accidents this year. And if you go back to 1989, prior to this year, there was a total of 5. And none of them involved destroyers being T-boned by the slowest ship on the sea. What we questioned, and by the way, when we questioned for our subscribers, YouTube actually took us down. They wouldn't tell us why. We sent 4 or 5 emails to them. We've still never, ever heard from them. So Jim Sinclair and I guess, according to YouTube, were considered fake news. But if you look at the holes in the sides of those 2 boats, the 2 destroyers, there are absolutely no horizontal scratch marks whatsoever. It's just a straight in hole. It's caved in with 0 scratching. Even if the destroyer was moving at 2 or 3 knots, you would see massive horizontal scrapings, and you see none. So what that tells you is both destroyers were dead in the water. Now, why were they dead in the water? I have no idea. Was everybody asleep? I don't know. Was the technology shut down? I don't know. But it would seem likely to me in today's world where you have cars that can drive themselves, that a destroyer would be able to anticipate the track of a slow-moving freighter and get out of the way. And that didn't happen, not once, but twice. So the question being, has China, has Russia trumped our technology? I think we're going to get an answer to that shortly, because with what's going on with North Korea, with what's going on with Venezuela, you would think that the U.S. has to have some type of military response. But so far we haven't. If there's no response, then it tells me there's a technology problem.
So you're saying that if the U.S. does nothing, there's technology out there that Russia and China or they're using against our equipment where they can just basically shut it all down.
Right. And that was the fear, I think it was 2 summers ago when the Donald Cook was buzzed.
Right.
I mean, in what world does a Russian fighter get to buzz a destroyer 8 or 9 times? I mean, you would have seen some type of reaction. And this was, these were close by flybys. And absolutely nothing was done. It raised eyebrows at the time. I remember talking about it. I remember hearing about it. It raised a lot of eyebrows at the time, and then it kind of died down. But these two T-bonings are bringing the subject really right to the forefront.
So, I mean, in your mind, what is the reason they're pushing so hard against North Korea with sanctions, and why are they making this such a big deal?
Well, first off, if I had to guess, I would guess that the little fat boy in Korea is a puppet of China. And China's got him on a string telling him, you do this stuff, you shoot these things off, and let's see if there's any response. And I do want to point out the ramifications to a weakened or, God forbid, neutered U.S. military is a dollar that goes completely in the toilet, because the only thing that's held the dollar up for the last 20 or 30 years has been the threat of the U.S. military. You either use the dollar or we're going to bomb you.
And you see this coming to an end right now, where now it's all out in the open. Is this a truth bomb where all of a sudden we're going to get word that the military is not as strong as we thought?
We don't know from a military standpoint, but what did China just tell us the week before? They're going to trade oil for yuan backed by gold. I mean, how much more of a slap in the face of the U.S. could there be? They're going to trade oil for yuan and back it by gold. I mean, remember, for all these years, the IMF, World Bank, et cetera, have stressed that there will be no government, no currency that backs or is backed by gold. They've been trying for years and years and years to push gold completely out of the system. Now China's bringing it back. And so is Russia. I mean, look at what, Russia's accumulated officially 1,500 tons or that China has officially accumulated 1,500 tons. On the back of a napkin, I can show you where they've accumulated 20,000 tons.
So how much longer do you think this is going to go on? I mean, do you think that, we're heading to something big happening this fall? I mean, there's a lot of, Charles Nenner, many others who are looking at cycle, Martin Armstrong is another, these different cycles occurring, and they're all pointing to this fall. I mean, do you see the same thing happening?
Well, I don't know from a cycle standpoint or not, because cycles are made to be broken. I mean, cycles don't always hold true. But just from a logic standpoint, for China to stand up and say, we're going to trade oil and pay for it in yuan, they just de-dollarized the world, didn't they? And that the dollar is the only thing that the U.S. has stood on for a standard of living for the last 20 or 30 years. Foreign countries send us goods and we send them dollars.
So what's the next move for the U.S.? I mean, what does the U.S. do right now as this is happening? I
mean, I don't know what to say from a nuts and bolts mathematics standpoint. If the dollar becomes unacceptable worldwide, our standard of living will drop 50% or more, because we don't make anything. We don't make the stuff that we need every day and we use every day. I mean, think just from the standpoint of your car. Your car breaks down. All these parts are made overseas. Where are you going to get parts? Where are you going to? You're going to walk into Walmart and you're not going to find a single electronic component, because they're all made overseas. They're not made in the U.S. anymore.
So basically, what you're saying, it's game over for the U.S.
So yeah, absolutely, yeah. It's been game over. Literally, it's been game over since 2007, 2008, or you could even say before that. But what they did was they extended and pretended by, the Fed lending, by keeping the credit edifice from coming down.